Hello and welcome to the Ireland on the Fly podcast about the people and places of fly fishing in Ireland. How many of you, I wonder, have ever fished the River Dodder? It's a unique and special river that flows through Dublin's city boundaries on the south side with sea trout, salmon and incredible numbers of brown trout to be had, a fact that not many capital cities can claim. But as an urban river, it faces many ongoing challenges, and Mark McAndrew, who is on the committee of the Dodder Anglers Association and fishes the river practically every day during the season, joins us on this week's episode to tell us about the remarkable survival and growth of the Dodder River. But first, Tom, did you ever fish it?
No, I've never fished it, Sarah. Never fished it. Walked by it loads of times because I was asking Mark about it there. So I never have. But you have, haven't you? Well, you have, of course, because you write about it.
Write about it and did a documentary on it. Actually, I must play that documentary again sometime. Spoke to Ken Whelan, spoke to Des Chew, got to fish on it for sea trout, brown trout. It was... just a remarkable experience. And so it's being a dub growing up, well, you see, it was on the other side, it was on the south side, didn't really get to see much of it that time. I was more interested in the Talca, but actually I want to do an episode on the Talca sometime.
Well, you have to shout for the north side, don't you?
Fight the corner. But I was just blown away when I did fish it that, like, you're in the city, there's double-decker Dublin buses going by and you're catching brown trout and dry flies and you're in, Dublin city boundary. Like, it's just incredible. And I remember Ken Whelan telling me the story. He said there was a cafe near the river. This was probably down by Donnybrook section or something, and the cafe was near the river, and he said he could see fish there, like they're just below the surface, and he said to them, do you know what's over there? And they're looking. They said, no, what is it? And he said to them, there's brown trout over there, and they're like, what? They couldn't believe, that they were just unbelievable. But when he actually pointed out to people, they're just flabbergasted by it,
I mean, it is, and we talk about it there with Mark. It is really amazing to think that in built up urban areas, and we talked about this, Mark, when we're looking at the end of the show, there's areas with graffiti banks, and
a rhino,
paying for your car parking, I mean, this is crazy for somebody like me who's like at this stage now well past my Dublin days. So I think it's amazing, but like, it sounds like there's good fish in there.
It is. It's well worth. I was saying to anybody, if you're in Dublin even for a meeting, like because pre-pandemic I would have been up in Dublin. I never did it now actually. I would have been up in Dublin maybe 2-3 times a week. Now I would have been more kind of Talbot Street end. But I often thought if I was going over the south side, I'd be getting the train up to Dublin, and I had half a thought of I'd pack the rod into the bag beside the laptop. I just thought it would have been hilarious. You know what I mean? Just pack the laptop, you had the rod, your fly box, leader, tippet material, and you could just saunter on down during the lunch break, catch a few trout. I thought it would have been brilliant.
Fantastic. And I remember chatting to Charles Rangy Wilson. And he did a program for BBC 2 years ago of trying to catch wild trout within the M25 in London. Now, as it transpires, there are a few more places as it's improved in London. I think the Wandle is one river and other things, but it was really like sort of a hunt and a quest. But like, there's no hunt or quest in the Dodder. Talking there to Mark and to you, if you're well prepared and go up, you're going to catch a few trout, and nobody bats an eyelid now. And Mark even said it there, and he said, he used to get asked, are there fish there?
Yeah,
he doesn't even get asked now because it's kind of out in the open now. People know it.
But the other thing as well is just to note as well is, and as Mark mentions, is the Dodder Anglers Association is one of, if not the biggest, fly angler clubs in Europe.
Yeah.
Over 1,000 members, 1,200, I think he said.
1,200, yeah. Wow.
The power is in the numbers as well. And that's what we delve into. It's really interesting how and why the Dodder survived and has done so well, going back to the 50s and 60s. So I think there's a lesson there for many other rivers and communities around it. So it's
really good.
It's a case study.
Really good. But listen, were you fishing during the week?
I finally got out for my first salmon outing this season, June. This is the latest it's ever been. But I am glad to say not many people in the country can boast about the fact that they have 100% success rate while going salmon fishing. And I currently hold 100% success rate. I've been once and I've caught.
Quit now, put the rod back in the tube.
I've retired for the season.
Tell us about it. Tell us about it.
I was brilliant. I went down to the Blackwater to Noel and Glenda. James Barry and Jason Nash actually were down there. They caught as well. And it was just, but you know what was brilliant? I was on the lug pool, which is a big pool just at the bend, just before the island stream. And there was fish showing. And that just sets the pulse racing.
Class. Doesn't it? Doesn't it?
Now
Gets you going.
I heard one splash and it sounded like a dolphin, and that's not the fella I caught. I caught the smaller guy, but just to see it, and do you know what? It was what I loved about it. It's what I love about salmon fishing as well. It's just you see it, you put a plan into action, and just that take. I'm thinking back to it's just the take. It's just the fly. It was in kind of slack water, just at the lug pool. People know, just kind of downstream, and it was in slack water. So I just started a slow retrieve, and as soon as I can still, as I'm talking to you, just the take, the zzz. I was like, oh yes, it's all come back.
You should write.
It's all right, but there's a book in that.
What size was he?
6. I say 6, so he's probably 5.
He might have been 7.
Could have been 7. You never know. But gleaming silver, and just I'm not going to denigrate it. 2 days earlier, I was out in the shore, caught a load of trout, 8 to 10 inches, loved it, absolutely loved it. But I'm sorry, Tom, there was nothing to compare it to catching the salmon.
Your soul is soul.
Soul to soul. So yes, so yeah, that's it. I'm retired for the season now.
That's it. If you don't do another day salmon fishing now this year, you'll have 100% strike rate.
Would you know what I'm going to do? Every time I want to go salmon fishing, I'm going to get Sean McLaughlin on the show just to give me the pep talk.
Positivity. It was the positivity. It rubbed off on you. You know you needed it.
I messaged him. I said, Sean, positive vibes. Thank you very much. So I'll just replay that podcast.
A little fill up for everybody. Just anybody who's going salmon fishing, re-listen to Sean.
Yeah.
Play it again.
Yeah. If you've been down in the dumps and you're struggling, just play that episode on the way to the river. You know, you never know. It worked for me. So look, from the salmon to smaller rivers, a lot different environments. We're going to hear about the Dodder now with Mark McAndrew. But I first asked Mark how his 2024 season has been so far.
Yeah, no, the season has been slower than the past few years. We've had a mix of northerly and easterly winds, mostly since the start of the season, and cooler temperatures. And we had a little bit of water at the beginning, but not much. So compared to the last few years, it's been much slower, not getting the stamp of fish or the number of fish. But in saying that, the Leinster Championships were on the river there a few weeks ago, and there was plenty of fish caught still, but maybe a little bit less than the last few times they were here. I think they had about 145 fish over 8 inches this time, whereas I think they were here was 5-6 years ago, they had 300 plus fish over that size. I think nearly 400. Wow. So that was an exceptional day. But in that case, they let there's a reservoir, they let water out of the reservoir, and it was fishing a bit better.
And are you mainly salmon or trout man, Mark?
So I'd say I was going towards salmon there for a few years, but I'm probably going back towards trout now, I'd say, with the climate that's in it and everything else, and just the accessibility of the trout.
I'll take over from here now, so
Your work is done now. Actually, you're not the first I've heard, in fairness, Mark. Like, just the way things have gotten with salmon, it's a case of, yeah, do you know what? I wouldn't mind having a bend in the rod. I think I'll take the trout rod out again. Like,
yeah, I would fish for salmon, sea trout, and brown trout, but they're all sort of have their time and their place, and I have a river for each, and I sort of just, when they're on, and I'll go after each. But here in Dublin, brown trout are the most easily accessible, so if I want to just nip out or two, it's trout fishing, it's got to be. And
you've fished the Slaney as well. I believe it's been tough on the Slaney.
Yeah, so I fished the Slaney. A couple of guys have been out in the Slaney a lot. So we're in Tullow, and I know guys who fish a bit lower down, and they're just not seeing the number of fish, or just hasn't been the number of fish caught as there has been even compared to last season. So it's been a really poor season, and a lot of guys are giving it a lot of effort, putting a lot of hours in.
And Kabir, you said beforehand you fished the Liffey. Are you finding it the same on the Liffey too?
Yeah, the Liffey's a bit of a complicated river anyway. It can be a cruel mistress, so it can be a feast or a famine on it as well. So I haven't been out on it enough times, but I haven't had a good day on it yet. I've only been out a handful of times, but it's a peculiar river anyway at the best of times. I fished the Rye a couple of times, the tributary of the Liffey, so that's a good early season river. And that was okay when I fished it, but wasn't flying either.
Is it kind of nearly also Because obviously the run of fish is so small on it. And because of the work you're doing on it, do you nearly feel like you're going out there just to keep an eye on things?
Yeah, no, sort of like that. You're going out just in hope. Like there's such a small head of fish. You have to target them at specific times and bottlenecks and things like that. But the chances of getting one are quite low. But the trout fishing on the Liffey, there's some big fish in it. Some of the fastest growing trout in Ireland are in the Lucan section. But again, because there's so many impounded sections and water quality issues, and then lack of gravels, the trout aren't there in massive numbers anywhere. But the trout that are there tend to be substantial. We've seen massive hatches of stuff. We actually have a YouTube video up on showing the hatches, and you can't see your hand in front of your face of mayfly and other species. Incredible hatches that have come back to this is only a couple of miles outside the city centre, but they just don't see trout reacting to them or any trout there in big numbers picking them off. So I think the spawning on the Liffey is just it's a little bit poor. The gravels aren't there to produce big numbers of trout, but if there is a trout there, he's going to have a lot of food.
But it's interesting you say you're not seeing a reaction from the trout to the flies at the moment.
Yeah, they don't react to the big hatches on the Liffey, but there's probably loads of nymphs and stuff over the surface. It's almost the exact opposite of the Dodder. The Dodder is full and stuff. It'll riffle and glide. It's just packed with small fish, and every inch of it is colonized by trout. Whereas the Liffey, you've sort of big areas where there isn't much in it. So it's two contrasting rivers completely.
Well, and you mentioned the Dodder. Let's move on to the Dodder. You kind of go out. I remember you telling me before you nearly try and get out every day if you can. Yeah,
so I'd be out on it at this time of the year. Like I'd be out at cast a line at least probably every day. If not, I went down this evening just for a walk. But yeah, I'm on it to some capacity and doing different things depending on the water level and heading to different spots as well depending on the water level and the time of the season. But it's a big part of my life.
Yeah, it's an incredible river. But tell us about the kind of works that you're involved in it now and why it was needed.
So the river's undergone a lot of change, particularly the lower river in the last few years. So there's been a greenway built on it, and also there's been flood defence schemes going up the river. So they've had a massive effect on the hydromorphology and also the habitat in the river. So I was something that became concerned about a few years ago when these schemes started. So I started to get involved from the outside. And then in recent years, I've been on the Dodder Anglers Committee. So as a member of the committee last year, we had some works engineered. So a greenway had gone through a section pretty close to the river, and they had built a cantilever out over the river and actually built a haul road out into the river to facilitate this. So they were actually going to take that out and not do anything afterwards, any rehabilitation works. So that's something I flagged. So we got in touch with the right people, and we went to IFI, and then we went to the council, who are actually very amicable, and they let us in then with a team from Rivas who we used for the Liffey, and they went in and we sort of went in and restored the riffle pool glide configuration back to the channel. So they put in little grade control structures called riffle bars. So what we had there was probably before the works, it was a sort of a glide, but it wasn't fantastic. But now we have sort of riffle pool glide the whole way down, so it's much more effective in terms of habitat, and it's much nicer to fish as well.
The greenway, because like they're brilliant, but I actually hadn't thought of it from a kind of an angler's point of view in the sense of, it's opening the river up. I suppose there's more people around. Is it kind of good and bad sides to it, like?
Yeah, it's actually something I could talk quite a lot about here. So I think greenways are built with people in mind, and because of that, they can be very detrimental to the environment. So we've seen massive fallout on the Dodder from them. So, for example, there's parts of the Dodder now that are lit permanently that have never been lit since the dawning of time. And when you have lights on the water, that affects the invertebrates, the bats, the fishing, everything has a massive negative effect. So now they're talking about going up through the parkland on the Dodder, and these areas that have been dark are now going to be lit permanently, and even they have LED bat-friendly lights, but the river's lit permanently. The other major effect is the riparian zone is being lost, because the architects obviously want people to have a view of the river, and when they do that, you lose the riparian zone, so the ecological value of the river drops dramatically. The shade, the invertebrates, all that, they go. And then also wildlife, particularly in somewhere like the Dodder, you have the only tracts of wild spaces where you have badgers and foxes are along the Dodder. So now those places have been opened up to tens of thousands of people every day. So as an environment now, it's much more open to people and much less wildlife friendly. And I think it's been devalued greatly. And I think it's a major concern going forward. I think they're planning one on the Liffey and the Tolka. and there's areas of those rivers that are undisturbed by people still. So once you bring people into those areas in big numbers, you lose the otter, you lose the dipper. They don't want to be around people. I think you can have the Greenway. I think it's a good idea, but I think you have to keep them a little bit away from the river and keep a little bit of a buffer zone. And I think something they need to consider. The people building the Greenways are the National Traffic Association, and they're road builders. They're not environmentalists. So they tend to make them very straight and remove any trees. And, they could have them much more wildlife friendly. And I think it's a good idea in the climate we're in to have more people using bikes, but I think the way we're doing it isn't the right way. And there's criticism of them all over the country, I think, from environmentalist groups. And so is it worth it? Is it worth having these highways, I guess, at the cost of damaging our rivers? I think we can have both.
I initially think, oh, that's positive, that's good, it's good work, it's opening up. But, and they're very valid points that you brought out there, that it's an infringement on the wildlife that's occurring, and we're becoming an invasive species once more into their territory. And as you say, and it's very good point you said there. A lot of these animals, they don't like people.
It must be a hard argument though at the same time, because I can see the human benefit, for communities and for people, and they walk, and it's great to be out in the open. But at the same time, isn't it? I suppose we're like, we're trying to go back to nature, and we're going back to rewilding and all that kind of stuff. So it's a really hard balancing act all the time.
Yeah, well, there's things we can do. How we build the tracks, not putting hard concrete things. We could have soft tracks. The lights could be lower. The lights don't have to be on all night. We don't need to light all the spaces.
I was going to ask you that. Sorry for butting in, Mark. But I was going to ask you, would it not be feasible to say, the lights should go off at 12:30 at night, until 5 o'clock in the morning, at least giving 4.5 or maybe 5 hours of darkness?
Yeah, and it's actually a battle I'm going to fight, because I waited for the last section to be built, and I was hoping that the lights are bat friendly. But once I've seen now, and also other sections, people are sending me videos that now when the lights are on, the river's lit, and all these places at night. So it hasn't worked. I was hoping that the LED light, it's meant to be directional, and it's not meant to fan out, but unfortunately it does. So it's actually something so maybe they would put them lower, or put screens or shades on them, or again, turn them off at night. But there's been good debate about this, and some of the politicians don't think the parkland should be lit, and some do. But you have this, safety, and people want to use it at night and don't feel safe walking down through the parks. Now, these parks aren't lit at the moment, and people are still using them. So in an urban environment, I think it's going to be a balancing act, but there's also going to be rural greenways as well. So it's going to be a consideration there. And I think once you put light on an environment that's not used to being lit, you're going to have a detrimental effect on it.
Where's the stretch for the Greenway, Mark? Where does it go?
So the Greenway started. So South Dublin County Council started building it from Bowher down to about Rathfarnham, and they've pretty much finished. And Dublin City Council have started at the other end, so they've just carried out work on a few little sections. So there's a section there in Donnybrook that was completed last year.
Is that down by the bus depot, is it?
Yes, exactly, across the road. So they've actually gone in through the back of a rugby ground which was actually that place was operating as a sort of rough ground, but it was operating as a wildlife meadow. You'd foxes and badgers and butterflies. And now you've sort of just a lot of people coming through it now on a tarmac, and it actually goes out over the river in part of it, because they couldn't fit it in. So they actually had to build the Greenway out over the river. So what was a tree-lined bank there is now a concrete flood defence wall. So it's been devalued there in terms of a habitat, but at least they let us in to do some work. So the internal part of the river now is better than it was, but the riparian zone is worse, and the lighting obviously is an issue. So I'd just say any further Greenway plans need to be more considerate of the environment and not just take the easiest route for people.
Yeah. Actually, I actually do know a bit of the Dodder from my time when I was in Dublin, but for those the listeners there that wouldn't be too savvy about it, how much of the river is in an urban area?
Okay, so it's about 27 kilometers, and I'd say most of it is in an urban area at this stage. So the city has followed it out. When you see old pictures, even in Donnybrook, and it was almost like this countryside back in the 60s and so on. But it actually starts. It's a tributary to the Liffey, but it starts almost like 10 meters away from the Liffey. They start in the same mountain, but the Dodder flows on a more direct route with a steep gradient through a couple of valleys. It actually then hits a reservoir. So if you're a member of the club, you can fish the reservoir stock that has some stocked rainbow trout in one lake, and it has a wild-headed trout in another lake. And then you sort of hit the sort of Tala Old Bawn area, and it comes through there. It's a granite river, so it's quite acidic and poor, and you sort of have steep chasms and stuff, but it's a very beautiful river there. And then it turns into limestone. And as the further you go down, the river gets richer and richer. And it's been lucky that it has parkland almost the whole way along it, which has preserved it. Probably the thing that makes it unnatural is the weirs. It's the most weird river in Ireland. So there's 168 barriers on it. So there's a serious issue, and all the tributaries of barriers. So anywhere they could throw a mill in the 1800s, they did. So and they're all still there today. So when you get down into the middle reaches, then the trout are about medium sized. There's the odd bigger specimen, but they're not very small. But there's lots of them. So it's quite good sport there, and the water quality has improved a lot in recent years. So it used to be like these people used to be laundries on it and dairy farms and stuff, and people used to just fire everything into it. So the water quality now is probably better than it's ever been.
As I said, I spoke to Ken Whelan about this, and I was fascinated because when I fished it, I was down at the Drop and Well pub and catching trout there and on nymphs and dries, and like I said, it was just like, if you ignore the traffic and the buses behind you, when you were actually just looking at the river and the rise in trout, you could have been anywhere like in the country. And then at night time I went with Ken for sea trout, and again it was quite a surreal across the far side, double-decker buses going by at night time, and the lights, the street lights are on, the houses behind on the far side, and the sea trout you're catching. It was just incredible. But I was struck, I couldn't get over just the amount of fishing, the quality of fishing that was there. Was it always, and now I know Ken told me about like kind of when they were with Ned Cusack, and they were very vociferous and very organised in terms of fighting kind of pollution and anything, and that they were seen in the 60s and 70s as basically, obstructionist, holding back progress, these kind of hippy dippy kind of crusty, who do you think you are? We want to build industrial estates, we want to build housing, and say you can't be in the way of progress. But they fought it, and as Ken describes to me, communities got involved. Communities became custodians of it, which was incredible. But have you seen, like, was it always, is it, like, I suppose, does it have its ups and downs in terms of the quality? Like, or is it a constant battle, I suppose, is what I'm asking, is you can't let your guard down, really?
I report a lot of pollution things on it. There's always a risk with it, but we've been very lucky. The Tolka, our sort of neighbour river on the north side, that has a fish kill every 2 years. Right. The Dodder hasn't had a bad fish kill in a long time. It's just small little ones here and there, and it's a miracle because there's so many misconnections and possible pollution events waiting to occur. But the Dodder Anglers, I guess, have a lot to thank for, because they started in the 50s and 60s, and again, as you say there, they took on many battles. So again, they were holding back progress, as you say, but there's a lot of tributaries of the Dodder that were tunnels and things like that, and could have been developed unless people objected to them. And at a time back then, people didn't really value the rivers. Well, I'll give you an example of the Drop and Well stretch that you were talking about. There was Belgian people over, and I've been to Belgium. All their rivers are concrete and there's no fish in them. Or they were amazed. They were seeing ducks and sort of wagtails and dippers just outside a pub in the middle of a city, and trout rising and people. So it's amazing that in the middle of Dublin, like, I live in an urban area, but I can walk for 5-10 minutes from my house and I have pretty good fishing. Yeah. So I think we're blessed in that respect. And actually the Leinster Championship, so it was the third time being held in the Dodder this year, but they thought it was such a good experience that they're going to have the national championships on the river next year. So that'll be very exciting for the club. And the guys when they run it on the Dodder, the guys do a very good job. And I think they're very happy. So everyone goes down to the Drop and Well after for a good feed. And I think the fishing is enjoyed. And I think a lot of the guys are surprised. They're not used to fishing these in an urban environment. They're crossing roads and walking through parkland, and sometimes you can contest with people with dogs while you're fishing your pool and stuff like that. So it's a very different experience.
But this will be the first national championship on the Dodder, will it?
Oh yeah. No, to my knowledge, yes, this will be the first national championships on the Dodder. So it's maybe the only first or only time it's ever been in an urban setting. So we'll just see what happens there. But
and what stretches actually will it be held on? Drop and Well, is it along there? Is it or?
So the Drop and Well is the lowermost part. where they have it. So that's the cut. If you're familiar with the bridge there, the last time for the Leinsters, that's where it stopped, and it went up past, up through the parks, the few parks above, and up to Bushy Park. And then there's a place just above that called Kilvere, another park there. So they sort of hem it all into that. Previous time they went slightly more downstream, down to Milltown. They'd more anglers, but you're talking really the middle reaches, which is probably the best of the fishing. I'd say it has the water quality drops a little bit when you go down below Dropping Well. So that section from Dropping Well upstream, you have the limestone, you have the bigger fish, a lot of fish, and then it's all parkland either side.
That's amazing, because like when you're driving between beats and sections on most national and provincial championship, you have to negotiate, silage machines, things like that. But like you're gonna have to negotiate traffic lights, double-decker buses.
Yeah, traffic lights and roundabouts, and then you're trying to find a parking space.
Well, I can't wait to cover that actually, Tom. We'll have to.
Yeah, definitely have to.
Be great.
Yeah.
I think, is it true to say that Dublin's the only European capital or European city that has brown trout, sea trout, and salmon within its city walls?
I think it's the salmon are spawning within the city limits. So I think you have lots of European cities that would have salmon rivers, but I think they run probably through the city to go somewhere else. There's a very small population of migratory fish in the river, but it's minute. So there's a barrier about a kilometre up the river. So the population of sea trout and salmon is absolutely tiny, and it's very at risk to a pollution incident. So it's as big as it's ever going to get unless they address the barriers. So I think Mark McAndrew once said that it was the smallest self-sustaining population in Ireland. So it's very vulnerable. So you have a weir a few kilometres up, then you have another impassable one straight after that, and then it's just a continuous line of weirs all the way up the river. Now the weirs are to be tackled, and it's on the list a number of bodies are looking at, including IFI and Department of Housing and also Dublin City Council. So there may be action taken on them soon. Whether my best thing, or I think the best outcome would be removal of most of them, because I think apart from fish passage, they cause other issues like impounding the water and trapping the gravels and stuff like that. So I think that we should be taking them out. And if we're going to build fish passes everywhere in Ireland, it's going to take 1,000 years and billions and billions of. So I think they shouldn't be there. So only in a case where there's an infrastructural reason for leaving it in, that's when you should build a fish path.
You say there's 168.
Yeah, so they're culverts. They could be bridge culverts, small little barriers, but there's a lot of substantial weirs, but it's 168 identified barriers.
Wow, there's a lot there.
And is Dublin City Council and the relevant bodies, are they open to the removal of weirs, obviously in stages, but are they open to this?
Yeah, I think so. As well, there's a lot of stuff coming from Europe that they're going to go, and it just needs education and a bit of a push. But they're all looking at removing them, and I think everyone's open to removal. It's just whether they actually have the courage to take it out completely, or will they go for the safe option and go for the fish pass that keeps everyone happy. And I think that's sort of been done on other sites. I think it takes a bit of balls to remove one, because they're going to upset some people, but it's the best solution for the river. The river can then function. Like the moving of sediments down the river is huge on any river. So once you've weirs, they're stopping that. And the Dodder has a reservoir on it, and that stops sediments coming down the river. We're lucky that our alluvial cliffs are below that reservoir, so the Dodder has loads of gravel in it. When we talked about the Liffey, there was no gravel because of there's 2 hydro dams, and also, but you'd hardly find a speck of gravel in the Liffey. So the Dodder anytime there's a flood, fresh gravel comes flying down it. So we're blessed, and also we're blessed with the water temperatures in the Dodder are low, because the reservoir up there they release from the bottom, whereas in the Liffey they release from the top. So you have a heated water coming down the Liffey, which is causing that major problems. So the Dodder is. It's in more favourable state than its bigger sister, the Liffey.
It is incredible, and I always urge people, like, if you're, I've often been, say, kind of that Donnybrook area, and I've had to go to meetings, and I've said to people, there's salmon and sea trout and brown trout in that river just over there, like, and people are like, what? And it's incredible, like, people walking by not realising what a gem it is, and the life that's in it. You said. There's something that struck me, and I think is really interesting, Mark, is like when we mentioned the 50s and 60s and how active the Dodder anglers were in the Dodder community and standing up for the river. And you think that's why now to this day that, touch wood, there's been so few fish kills in recent memory, and that it's such a proactive community involved in the river, so that people know there's no messing around here, because there will be consequences if anything goes wrong, because you've got such a strong body of people standing up for it.
Yeah, there's the Dodder Anglers, but you also have this group, the Dodder Action, which carry out cleanouts in the river, and they've become very strong and powerful in terms of influence on the river. They're around, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 years at least. And then you also have community groups, and schools are now getting very involved in the river. Like there was a flood defence scheme on one of the tributaries, and a local community group fought that and took that on. They didn't win, but it seems people have a real attachment to it, because they have access to it, and they can see it. So it's sort of well looked after. And anytime there is a sort of pollution, like there was a bad sort of runoff last year on part of the Greenway higher up, and it was all over social media. There was raw sewage going in, but it was caught straight away. And actually today there was another incident where there was sewage running out of a pipe only about 200 meters from the river. But again, people are on it straight away, and so action is taken. But one day somebody won't get one, and there might be a fish kill. But it seems that these things are going off all the time, but they're addressed, they're caught. Or I think it's very bad.
There's many eyes and ears, isn't there? Like,
yes,
yeah. You mentioned there about access. What's the access like for anglers on the river?
Yeah, so the access is brilliant, because you've parkland on both sides with sort of footpaths through it, so you can walk. You can walk up and down it and fish to your heart's content. Although you'll find the bigger fish in the less travelled places, so you have to get off the beaten track. But there is some bigger fish in it. But I have a feeling you catch them when there's a drop of water in it, or if you go, or early season, or if you go somewhere that hasn't been fished. But I have a feeling a lot of them get caught when they're small, and they get very cute and wary, and then they have to let their guard down for you to get them again. But I've seen a dramatic improvement in the fishing the last maybe 3 years or 4 years since COVID. You didn't stock the river, so the river's stocked. So they didn't stock it during COVID. And we sort of great wild fish, and everyone noticed the size of the wild fish got bigger, and also the number of the wild fish. So the club in the last 5 or 6 years have reduced the number of stockies by half. So we think that's had a dramatic improvement. And there's research to say that there's similar effects to that. So there was a river in the States, the Odell River in the Madison, and they had been stocking one, and they stopped, and then they started stocking a neighbouring one, and they pretty much found that the size of the trout and the number of trout, the biomass doubled when they stopped stocking one river, and then it halved when they stocked the other river. So there's the Talca they still stock, but we used to stock a lot of rivers, used to stock the Rye and all these, but they stopped. But the Dodder, because there's tradition there, and most of the members only fish the first 2 weeks of the season, so it can be combat fishing down there. If they feel they have to stock it, but if they didn't stock it, we'd probably have more wild trout and bigger wild trout. So it's this constant, I guess, in an urban area, trying to make everyone happy and sort of deal with the needs of the members at the time. The club is, I think, one of the biggest in Europe, and not the biggest. There's 1,200 members.
It's incredible.
But most of those, as I said, only fish the first few days of the season. So it's a crazy experience. I don't know if you've been there. I've seen the pictures on opening season, but like on the walls above the weirs, it's just like shoulder to shoulder, lads. And then you can fish in the summer when the fishing's actually good and there's nobody on it.
Why do people only go out in the first 2 weeks?
Yeah, so just the
tradition.
So a lot of them would be inexperienced anglers, or just people who love catching those bigger trout that are easy to catch. But I guess what I've seen in those big fish they put in for the kids, and what I've seen is they disproportionately get caught by some guys, and the kids don't get very many. So you get like some guys getting 100 hours a week, and some of the kids not catching very much. So. But it's a sort of a tradition, and I know they do it in the Talca as well, but they have fish kills over there, so they might need to put stockies sometimes in places to keep the fishing going. But I think long term, and as we become more environmentally conscious, I see probably stocking going, becoming a thing of the past.
Well, it's those figures that you stated there from the river in America. What was it, the Odell?
The Odell and the Madison,
biomass increasing. But then, I think you hit a very important point there. You've got to how do you keep everybody happy at a club? and particularly a club with over 1,000 members. You know.
Yeah, so I started teaching people to fish, kids to fish. So I was out with a school there with IFI the other day. So I was told you before, I was an app guy cast instructor, but I don't really do it for monetary gain. I just if I'm called out. But my idea is if we teach kids the dry dropper and the nymph, and they learn to catch wild fish, I think they're going to much more likely to stay in fishing. When they can't get the stockies after the first 2 weeks, they vanish anyway. So once they can't get those easily caught fish. So I think giving them a more sustainable way, and the river has so many fish in it. Like there's days you can catch 100 when it's on. There's small fish, but like they're plentiful.
What age were the kids you were teaching, Mark?
So in this instance, they were I think they were final year in school, in an inner city school.
Secondary or primary?
Secondary school. So a couple of the guys that started fishing, the IFI have something, the Dublin Angling Initiative, they roll out in this school in the middle of the city centre. But these were the guys who had stuck at it, were the most keen. So 4 guys came down and all really nice fellas, but one of them got really into it. And they've all bought their own rods. This guy was fishing the Dodder regularly, so I got them a few fish anyway, so they're happy enough.
And was it fly fishing they'd normally be doing?
Yeah. So they start them off with spinning, and then they introduce them to fly fishing. So it was only fly fishing I was showing them. So just I showed them the Euro nymph and the dry dropper, and they already had a basic grasp of it. So I showed them what to use, and sure they were off. They were flying.
And they caught.
The caught was 3 guys. Yeah, it was 3 altogether. So 2 of them got fish, and one guy was close. He had no wellies, so he was very limited where you can go. Yeah. The ones that could just paddle in a little bit more had more access to so it was actually the drop and well stretch that you fished.
Were they surprised at the fishing to be had there in the Dodder
Yeah, they'd some nymphs and dries, but nothing really suitable. And I think they stirred a couple of fish, but I gave them sort of the right stuff. Yeah. And then there was fish coming up for the dries, and there was fish hitting them every time. So they weren't always setting the hook, but they were getting opportunities, and they could see that was having an effect. Brilliant. So I definitely think one of those guys is probably going to be a lifelong fly angler.
That's great work, Mark. Fair play to you. That is really commendable to do that. Give up your time to doing that. No, that's great.
Well, I'd say IFI, it's their initiative. They put a lot of work into that school. So I think it's them we should be thanking. But they could roll that out across the country if they had the resources. But this school is miles away from anywhere, so any river. So these guys get buses to the Dodder and stuff. So it's amazing. They would never have encountered the river otherwise.
And I suppose it gives them more of an appreciation of their city and the river that flows through it then, and the next time they see it. Like, I remember Des Chu actually, who obviously is involved with a lot of that, and he was on that documentary I did years ago, and he told me, he says sometimes he'd be fishing, he says, on the Dodder, and he's meeting the lads that he would have taught 15, 20 years ago maybe, and they're still fishing, and he meets them on the riverbank, and he says that's the biggest thrill, to see them still fishing all these years later, so it's great to see. So going forwards for the Dodder, actually just a couple of practical things on it. If somebody is interested in fishing, the brown trout on it, is it like day tickets? Can they get them? Where do they get them? How do they get access to the river? Where should they go?
So in terms of getting a permit, the permit is probably the cheapest permit in Ireland. It's €10. It's probably been like that since the 50s. But you can get, and the kids one's even cheaper. I think it's a €5. But you can get a permit in pretty much any tackle shop on the south side of Dublin, and also in Southside in the city centre. So once you have that, you have access to the whole river and the 2 reservoirs. You can fish pretty much anywhere on the river parkland. So just find yourself parking, and just make sure the one thing with an urban river is you have to pay for your parking sometimes. But the further you go up the river, there's car parks and there's free parking. But if you're going to fish sort of the middle and the lower bits, you be careful not to get clamped. So that's one of the challenges. But the whole river I recommend. As you go very high up, as I said, it's acidic, so the fish are getting a little bit smaller, but they can be easier to catch. As you go up there, they're not pestered as much.
Come here. I just had this, down at not a city centre, but a suburban car park, and you're getting out and you're putting on you've chest waders or fly fishing waistcoat and trundling off the fly rod. It's not what you'd imagine in an urban build-up.
It's something that I was very conscious of when I was younger doing it, but now I just walk around the middle of like Donnybrook with the gear on, crossing the pedestrian crossings and stuff, and just completely oblivious to it. But yeah, maybe people looking on and where's this lad going? But it
Yeah.
just yeah, like, but yeah, and it's just, yeah, I guess people accept it. You don't get as many people coming up to you anymore asking you, oh, is there fishing there? That used to happen a lot. I think people are a bit more aware that it's a pretty healthy river and that there's good wildlife and stuff in it.
And actually, just talking about fishing it, are you better off with the pair of chest waders?
Yeah, I would wade definitely on the Dodder because yeah, there's a lot of overgrown trees and bushes, and it's a tricky river anyway at the best of times. So if you can get into the channel and have your cast going behind you,
Right.
and get into those holes, and so I'd recommend even wellies, but wellies it's sometimes deeper than it seems, so you can be in over
Yeah.
the wellies pretty quick. So if you want to fly fish correctly and get into the pockets, and well, yeah, you definitely need to be wading.
I'd highly recommend it for anyone, just out of interest. If you're in Dublin, if you're living that side, like how often can you say it? That you're in a European capital and you can just, finish work or on your lunch break, you can take out the rod, put on the waders, and you could be catching trout. Like, I think it's incredible. It's testament, Mark, to the work you guys do, the Dodder Anglers, the Dodder Action Group, going right back to Ned, Ken Whelan, all those guys. It's just incredible. Over half a centuries of work gone into it. Like, I think it's absolutely amazing. Do you think going forwards, what's going to be the biggest issue for the river?
So in the immediate future, so there's two things about to happen on the more parts of the Greenway are due to be going out for public consultation, and also a flood defence scheme.
Right.
So the flood defence scheme was carried out in the lower river, and basically they walled it in. So it was very unpopular with the public, the general public, not just the anglers and the activists. So I think now they're trying to do it in a more environmentally conscious way. So they've offered three options of what they can do. So they seem to be this time anywhere there's a house near the river, instead of walling in the river, they're going to wall in the house, or they're going to wall in the parkland outside of the park and let the park flood.
Okay.
That makes sense. Rather than just putting the river.
Run that by me again, Mark.
So rather than building large flood walls right in the riparian zone like they did lower down, there's a lot of parkland on the Dodder, so they're going to replace the existing parkland walls with flood walls and let the water out into the parks rather than putting these invasive walls. But there will still be hard defences in some places, which isn't ideal. And they're actually doing a small tributary of the Dodder, the White Church stream, and they've put like a 15-foot high wall, so no light's ever getting in there again. So mad stuff like that.
But the idea is that the parkland could flood naturally, as it would if nobody ever lived there, if it was in the wild, and then just gradually, as the floodwater recedes, it just drains itself naturally.
Yeah, so they're letting the water into the floodplain, and they've given options. They can build these hills or mounds even in places to create more places to catch water rather than the walls. But if they build the walls, they can retain some of the existing vegetation, but the hills they'll have to bulldoze. But in the long term, then we'll have a greener space. But they're also looking at water attenuation upstream. But it might be a little bit, this should have been looked at before the scheme, but they're trying to plant and re-wet the bogs up there at the very top of the Dodder as it runs through bogs, so that the bogs they re-wet them, they re-wild them, it acts like a sponge, and you get a slower release of water. What happens with the Dodder at the moment, because there's no trees up there, the water goes in a spate straight into the river, straight out to the sea. So you get these rapid flood events.
Yeah.
So a more sort of practical and cost-effective way was actually to start to go and re-wet and make these habitats upstream much more viable, and then that would stop these flood events we have, and it would also give us a more consistent flow of water into the channel.
It's interesting. It's the climate change stuff, isn't it, that having to fight? Like,
yeah, well, the problem with the climate change, if we go back putting trees in the places, like I suppose the big one on rivers that they're seeing is the temperatures, and there's some 7 degrees warmer some of the rivers like the Liffey in the summer now. But they're saying one thing that stops that is trees. If you have riparian trees, that keeps the water cool. And we see where there's the most trout in the Dodder is like Bushy Park, for example, is tree lined on both sides. And also you've Furhouse and Knockline where nobody can get in, no person, and there's trees falling down there creating pools. But because nobody can get in, the trout numbers are excellent, and there's no councils pulling out any log that falls in, or been messing with the channel, worrying about flooding. Now it's a bit rough for the anglers trying to get in and that, so you have to keep everyone happy. But I've heard that area described as a fish factory.
Wow.
With councils and stuff want to open it up, but I guess you have to find the balance. But anywhere the river's left alone, it thrives.
Very true, very true. With the help of you guys, might add.
Yeah.
Come here, Mark. Last question. I actually didn't. I only just thought of it there. Have you got a most memorable fish on the fly on the Dodder?
Yes, I have one. So probably the first 2 pound brownie I got on the fly, on my 3-weight rod.
Wow.
So I got it in a very nice pool, but I was just nymphing in under a bush, and I hit this thing, and it took me a good few minutes to land it. Maybe the guts of 5. I don't know how long it took, but it was a good battle anyway. But I'd only been nymphing a little while at that stage, and that was the first really, really good fish I got out of the river on it. I just remember the battle and everything, and it was such a beautiful looking fish, almost predatory looking in terms of the head and the vivid colours. So I guess that'd be the fish that would stick with me.
Fair play. 2 pounder from the Dodder.
Wow. What stretch roughly was that in?
What
area? I want coordinates.
We'd say just upstream of Bushy Park.
Between Boher-na-Brina and Donnybrook.
Yeah, somewhere there.
I know it well.
I'll send you a pin.
Exactly. Well, Mark, keep up the great work. You guys are doing brilliant work on it. It's I hope people have got an insight into the river, quality of the river. It's something we should all be so proud of to have, and the quality of fish that's in it. So you never know. Next time you're going over a bridge, look in and you might see a fish rising, and you might see an angler there as well. So all the better. Mark, thanks again for joining us.
No worries. Thanks, lads. Cheers.
Our thanks to Mark McAndrew for joining us on the show. Don't forget to rate, review and follow the Ireland on the Fly podcast on Apple, Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts from.
Plus you can keep up to date on IrelandOnTheFly.com as well as on Instagram, and myself and Tom will be back with another episode about the people and places of fly fishing in Ireland.